Well, I want to welcome you to our program today. We have a very special guest. His name is Stu Martin. Stu, so good to have you on the show today. And Stu is a person who, well, he's gone on many mission trips to Russia. But before we're going to talk about that, I should also mention that Stu has been, he's from Nashville, Tennessee, where he has been a singer. He has been a country western singer, a southern gospel singer. He has produced some of his own recordings. And so I tell you, that's very impressive, Stu. And I know that you have sung with some pretty big names over the years, Johnny Cash being one of them. What was that like?
I remember the first time I sang with Johnny. It was so funny. I was so scared. My mouth was like dry. I mean, it was like cotton in my mouth. And we were backstage, and Johnny said, "Yeah, you're nervous." I said, "Yeah, I am." "Why are you nervous?" I said, "Because you're back here." He said, "You singing to me or you singing to the Lord?" I said, "I'm singing to the Lord." He said, "Then you ain't got nothing to be nervous about, because I'm just a man."
Isn't that something? Yeah.
And I went on and everything was fine. Knew Johnny, sang with Johnny, sang with people like Connie Smith, Roy Drusky, Skeeter Davis, George Hamilton IV. I've had the pleasure of being good friends with great songwriters like Dallas Frazier, who wrote the big song Elvira, and Alley Oop, and a bunch of #1 songs in country. Also wrote the gospel song, He Is My Everything.
Okay. Well, Stu's, you got just a beautiful voice, and I'll tell you, it's just really a lot of fun just to listen to you sing. And I know that the Lord, took hold of you to, use this beautiful voice that God has given to you to sing to the Lord, to bring glory to His name. And I know that you've had quite a ministry over the years too. That you have pastored some churches, and so why don't you just share a little bit about your faith life in just a matter of a minute here or so, and how you got going in the ministry.
Well, when I first moved to Nashville, I thought I was just going there to be a songwriter and a gospel singer. But like always, the Lord has more for us than we even know we have. And once I got to Nashville, I recorded and had some success on some songs and stuff, but that wasn't all the Lord wanted me to do. And He kind of pulled me out of my comfort zone. Lord's good at doing that.
Yeah.
But He pulled me out, and He sent me on a missions trip to Bosnia and Croatia. It was during the time when Bosnia and Croatia there was a civil war going on with Serbia. And anyway, I was not wanting to go. I was like, "Oh, no. And the Lord finally talked me into it. I always tell people I'm one of those the Lord sometimes has to hit over the head with a 2x4 to get His attention. And He kind of nailed me in the back of the head with a 2x4 to get my attention that He wanted me there. Well, I went and spent 4 months there in Sarajevo and in Zagreb. And when I came back, I was very disappointed. Very disappointed. We had a lot of great things happen. A lot of miracles occurred. but also there seemed to be a lot of, how do I put it, politics with the church. It was so much so that the politics overran the evangelism. So that you had missionaries that were more interested in what things looked like than what they were there to do. They were more interested in keeping the upper people happy than to do what they were sent there to do. And so when I came back, I was like, man, I don't want to have anything to do with missions. I don't want to. I don't get. I said I was on a rampage. I was like, bring all the missionaries home. We don't need to be there. We're the ugly Americans. And I was back probably a year, and a man by the name of Harold Whitmer, Pastor Harold Whitmer, came to me and said, Stu, I want you to go to Russia with me. I said, for what? He goes, for a mission trip. And I said, oh, no. I said, I have done that. I've got the cheap T-shirt. I've done, no way. He said, okay. Following year, he came back and said, Stu, I want you to go to Russia with me. I said, no, Harold, I done told you I've had all I can do with missionaries. I don't want to have nothing to do with it. Next year, he come back. And he didn't say, Stu, I want you to go to Russia with me. He said, Stu, you're going to Russia with me. I said, Harold, when are you going to get it in your head? I am not going. And that night, the Lord woke me up and said, you go to Russia with me. And I said, Lord, I don't want to go. I've been there. I've seen what it is. I don't want to have anything. I said, you know how I feel about it. The Lord said, you go with Harold. 2 weeks later, Harold calls me on the phone. He goes, you ready yet? I said, yeah, Harold, I'm ready. When are we going? He told me, and I said, okay. I said, what do I need? He told me what I needed, and I went out, started to raise some money, and sure enough, all the money came in. So I went with Harold to Russia for the first time. That was in 2000. And all of a sudden, it was like a light went on. And I followed Harold through that 2 weeks that we were there. And I'm like, I'm watching the Apostle Paul. Because everything Paul did, Harold was doing. It was beautiful.
Did Harold know the language?
No. We had interpreters. We carried interpreters with us everywhere we went. Harold today still can't speak. He don't even know how to say goodbye in Russian or hello. He's one of those. Harold is one of those old time, Baptist preachers.
Yeah. So, how many years ago was that when you and Harold, Pastor Harold, went to?
The year 2000.
The year 2000.
And I have been going back every year since then, and sometimes twice a year. This trip coming up in May will be my 20th trip to Russia.
I must say that I'm going to be going with Stu this May, as I went last May, and it was kind of the same thing for me, is that I had Stu on the program here a couple of years ago, and then sometime after this Connect interview, he calls me out of the blue and says, Jeff, I want you to go to Russia with me, and I kind of gave him the response that he gave Pastor Harold Whitner, and he's saying, no, this was not even anywhere on my radar screen. And so I told Stu no, and I think his whole attitude was, well, okay. Well, then sometime after that, he called me again, and he said, Jeff, I'd like you to rush, and I could just feel the Holy Spirit just well up in me, where just as I was ready to say no, Stu, I said, oh yeah, Stu, when are we going? kind of a thing. And so I've been very thankful that I was able to go last May with Stu, and I was able to see, just all of the great ministry that's happening there. Their senior pastor, who is also the bishop, his name is Pastor Grigori Tropet, and he is just like the Apostle Paul when I consider, just all of what he is doing. But as Stu had mentioned, he's going back now this May, and I and a number of other people will be going as well. But getting back, so this will be your 20th trip.
20th trip.
Your 20th trip. And so it's one thing going on a mission trip, and I know now this will be my second trip, but going on a mission trip, sometimes it's like, well, I've been there. That was a wonderful experience. And, to go back a second or a third year, but 20 years, obviously you certainly have a partnership in the gospel with the pastor there. His name is Gregory Tropet, and the church. And so that's been, like I said, a very good partnership. You've been yoked with them in the Lord's work. And so let's just talk a little bit about Pastor Grigori Tropet. How long has he been the pastor there? When did you get to know him?
Well, to give you an idea about this church, let me tell you this. Harold started going to Russia in 1995. It was in 1996 he met a young missionary pastor by the name of Grigori Tropets. Harold was doing some evangelism work in a city called Kaluga. How he got to Kaluga, Kaluga's about 165 miles from Moscow. So how he got from Moscow to Kaluga is one of the great. It shows you how God works in mysterious ways. But anyway, Harold was working with some of the orphanages in the Kaluga area, and he was doing evangelism, doing a crusade. He had hired a old movie theater, and they were doing these crusades every night. They did a 4-night crusade. And Harold said the first night they had it, they had about 200 people. Second night, they had about 400 people. Third night, it was standing room only. Couldn't get any more in the building. He said the second night, he met Pastor Grigori, that came on the second night. He came on the third night, he came on the fourth night, him and his wife. At the end of the fourth night, Harold said there was so many people, they literally had something, I think he told me something like 500 people got saved during that 4-day period.
Wow.
And anyway, after the service on the fourth night, Pastor Grigori walks up to Harold and he says, I've got a church of 10 people. He said, we could have a big church, but we're praying for some land. So we're praying for some land and a building. And Harold asked him, said, well, do you have anything in mind? And Pastor Grigori said, yeah, right down the road here, there's an old broken down movie theater. And said, we've been praying every day, walking around the property, praying that the Lord will give us that property, that building. Harold says, well, let me see it. So they walked down the street, and he showed him, and you met him last year. Hubert White was with Harold, and Hubert looked at the building, and he's like, well, we'll never we'll never fix this building. We'll tear it. This building has to be torn down because the roof was caved in, the wall was caved in. I mean, it was one wall in front and like this. It was just an L. That was all it was left of the building. Wow. And Hubert thought, man, alive, this is going to be a project, and I have to get this to salvage this building. And so Harold looked at him and he said, well, how much do they want for this property and everything? And Pastor Gregory said, oh, they want a lot of money. And he said, well, how much is a lot of money? And he said, oh, $3,000.
Okay.
And Harold said, what? He said, $3,000. He said, well, Harold said, well, you know, one person in America can buy this building.
Yeah, so that was kind of the start then of this church in Kaluga.
So Harold bought the church. They came back, raised the money, took it back over, built the church. And it's where the main church is still today, is the main church still today.
So now when you look at, you said, what, 1997?
1996 is when he met.
1996. And so where the church, started, $3,000, fixing up this old building, to where it is today. And so now, why don't you just mention just as far as how many churches has Pastor Grigory Tropet and this church in Kaluga, Russia, how many church plants and rehabilitation centers, and they're working with orphanages and stuff?
So think about this, 1996, 10 people, not even a church building. 20 years later, not only the church building that holds 400 people, and they have 4 services a Sunday because they got so many people trying to get in. But he's opened 3 rehabilitation centers, and one of them is a big, big farm. And Jeff, you've been there, you've seen it. And a rehabilitation in the center of town, and now they got another rehabilitation center and going up in another part of Kaluga, another part of the region, and they've started 58 churches in every little village and city and town all through the region, from cities. They've got a church in Moscow now, they have a church in Tula, which is another major city. They have, and we're hoping to go there. I still want you to go to the church in Tula and Mashulsk, just all through every little village and town. He's planted churches. Now, one thing about it is, in every one of these little villages and towns that he's planted a church, there's an orphanage. And he's working with the church to the orphanage, connecting them, so that we have a connection to the community through the thing.
So that's a lot of what got me interested in going with you, is seeing all the wonderful work of the church, the rehabilitation centers, the way that this church is growing, and that's kind of what I thought of Pastor Tropet as being like an Apostle Paul, planting all these churches and getting these rehabilitation centers, but really focusing in on the mission, working with the orphans. And so now when you think of orphanages, we almost think, well, that's something way of the past. I mean, you have to almost go back to the 20s and 30s and 40s, here in our culture to really think about orphanages. But orphanages are still, so much a part of their culture. And there's an orphanage in just about every community, isn't there?
Yes, there's an orphanage just about in every small town or community.
And so why so many, how many orphans would you say are, I realize it varies.
According to the United Nations Children's Fund, that there's almost 1.8 million orphans in Russia alone.
1.8 million. And I know that each orphanage, there was anywhere from, what, about 15 to 300, yeah. Yeah. And why so many orphans? 1.8 million. It's not like they've had a big civil war like what's going on in South Sudan that's leaving a lot of kids orphaned.
You got to remember, they had the war in Chechnya, the the war in Afghanistan, that left a lot of orphans, more orphans. Plus, Russia has many, many problems. Number one is, even from the earlier days of after communism fell, the people are so poor, they can't handle or can't raise children. So they basically turn them into the government, saying,
So that's one
I
of the
can't
things
raise them, so you have them.
So they can't afford it, okay.
They can't afford it.
Because I always thought that one of the big things was alcoholism.
It is. It's alcoholism, drug use. Alcoholism is the number one problem in Russia. It is said. It is said by the. It's said, and it's actually probably the truth. 70% of all the men in Russia are alcoholics, and about 60% of the women.
Yeah. So in a lot of cases, they're not able to take. Okay. So economy, war, alcohol, drug addiction has made it for a lot of orphan children.
Right. And abuse, physical, sexual, things like that. And that's how come one of the things that we're praying about is they just passed this new law that says that it's all right for a husband to abuse a wife as long as he don't leave marks.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But that's not only the wife, but it's the children. Mm-hmm. But then the government comes in when there's abuse and pulls children out and sends them to the orphanages, and the parents are like, okay, it's your problem, not mine.
And, the orphanages, they varied from orphanage to orphanage. It looked to me like all the children were well taken care of. And then, in some cases with some of these orphanages, they really provided an awful lot. I mean, some of them were learning about art and, writing skills and drama and woodworking. And so my perception as I was there is that most of these orphans are getting good care, but one of the very important things that we are now working on is wanting to build a transition house for orphans, because orphans, they have to leave the orphanage at age 16, and some of them are prepared to be able to adapt to society, to transition into society, and others are not. And so the importance of this transition house for orphans. Why don't you share this project with the people?
This project came about 4 or 5 years ago. When we started, one of the things I saw on I think it was my second trip to Russia, and it bothered me tremendously, was that these kids have to be sent out of the orphanages at 16 years old, 16, 17, I think the oldest is 17. And, but 16, they have to be put out of the orphanage. And they're on their own. And we watched them literally take a young girl that they handed her a bag. It was like a little, not even a carry-on suitcase. It was just a little knapsack type of thing. Handed her to her. Almost every one of the orphanages has a fence around it. And you've seen them. They have a fence around it, the gate, and they put her outside the gate, handed her the bag, gave her 50, not even 50, I think it was about 20 rubles, which isn't even $1, and shut the gate and said bye-bye. And we were upstairs when this was happening, and I was looking out the window watching it, and I said, what are they doing? And the director said, oh, she's having to graduate out. She has to go live somewhere else. And I said, you just throw her out on the street? And they said, yeah, well, she has to go somewhere else. And then all of a sudden, up drives a black Mercedes, and two men in black leather coats come out of the car, open up the back door, and push the girl inside, and then drive off. And we found out that these are the mafia. And they were picking up these girls and these boys and using them in the sex trade and drug trade and whatever the mafia was doing. Or these people, or the military would come and grab them, and off to the army they would go. And I said, we can't have this. So about 5 years ago, I started talking with Pastor Gregory about building a home, a transition home, to, as these kids come out of the orphanages, that we can get there before the mafia, pick these kids up, have a good working relationship with the directors to let us know when these kids are ready to go, and we'll take them to this home. We'll put them in this home with adult supervision. We'll give them good teaching lessons, good learning skills, and stuff like that. And we started raising money for it, and it's beginning to get built, and it's called the House of Hope.
The House of Hope. And so that's, the big project that's going on right now, and that's a project that I've become very invested in, and that the church where I serve, it's the Lutheran Church of Peace in Platteville, Wisconsin, that we are having a spaghetti fundraiser. It's very good. It's on April 11th. Serving is between 4:30 and 7 p.m. And so we encourage you to come out to the Lutheran Church of Peace, Platteville, Wisconsin, 1345 Water Street, between 4:30 and 7 p.m. For a wonderful fundraiser to help in this effort to build the House of Hope, a transition house to help these orphan children so they don't get sex trafficked or just simply get shuffled into the army. Because I did hear a story that, well, a lot of these kids, they are on the front lines because if they get killed in battle, nobody will miss them. And so we want to certainly know that God loves these children so much and that they are more valuable than that. And so we would certainly want you to be involved with this and to support this very important mission. And so, Stu Martin, thank you so much for being on our program today. Stu, country western singer, gospel singer, and now a mission worker, God's worker to Russia. Thanks for joining us this day, and God bless you.